in this series over the next couple weeks. So if you remember from the announcement video, this is basically like the cheesy line of it is like, you are an exclusive drop from heaven, right? Like the idea, and stay with me here, the idea being like you are not from this earth. This is not your home. And therefore the things that circulate around your life and that your life rotates around should not be the things of this world. But that sounds really nice and churchy. What does that actually look like in today's world? So we're going to get into that. But if I were to pose a question for us to think about this and to frame our discussion over the next couple weeks, it would be, what is the relationship between our identity, our value, and our values? Right? I'll say that again. What is the relationship between our identity, our value, and our values? Because your identity is directly correlated to your worth and your value and what you value. And so a lot of us, even those of us who would say that we're Christians or we follow Jesus or maybe we've grown up in church, we would think, okay, I've got a pretty good handle on that. But when you look at your life, there tends to be a gap between Sunday and then Monday through Saturday. And not because you're intentionally two-faced or three-faced or four-faced, and not because like it's just you try to fit in with this crowd over here and then fit in with this crowd over here, but simply because as we go through life, we adjust, we adapt, we get used to how we're supposed to act in different contexts. And so the underlying question is what drives your behavior, what drives your values, and what drives you as a person in your own value. And so what is the relationship between our identity, our value, and our values? That's what we're going to be getting into. And really at the bottom of that question is, who am I really? And so just to give you a little frame of reference of where I'm talking about, think about it like a brand, okay? Like, think about it when we're talking with our middle schoolers, we talk about it like you're a limited edition brand, which somebody was wearing the shirt earlier. You got right there, yeah. Show everybody your shirt real quick. I'm not weird, I'm a limited edition. Yes, I like that. That's pretty good. So that's basically the whole point of this entire series, is that shirt right there. And so, but the reality is, brands change. Like, they go through different trends, designs go through different trends. If you look back at your life, I'd imagine that there were different pictures that you'd look at from different seasons of your life, and you'd go, who am I? Why did I choose to get up that morning and wear that thing or do my hair that way? When I was in high school, okay, one of the things was to straighten your hair with like the flat irons. You know what I'm talking about? Ladies use it. And so I was one of many who participated in this, but for only special occasions. So me and my buddy Kyle, we did this. I think I got a picture in there. He and I, we were on a cruise ship at that time. Yes, I am. So we thought we were pretty cool. For special occasions, we'd straighten our hair and think we were the stuff right there. So for context, this is what my hair normally looked like. It was a little more wavy. So that was a phase. It was also, that's my sister. So I also went through a kind of weird stage where I needed something. You got to understand, I went to a private Christian school where you had to keep your hair cut short. So this was obviously a summer because I was allowed to have longer hair. But I had to keep my hair short, and you weren't allowed to have any piercings. You weren't allowed to have any weird colors in your hair. So you only could have natural colors. There are all kinds of like limitations, restrictions. And then I worked at Chick-fil-A too. And at the time, you weren't allowed to have any facial hair there either, except for like a mustache, which I didn't do. So that was the one trend I avoided. But all that to say, when I finished my junior year of high school and I was going to the summer before my senior year, I thought, you know what? I'm turning 18 this summer. I'm going to be an adult. I'm going to live my best, freest life I'm going to go into my senior year with the major. By the way, my senior year was a joke. I mean, I took one class. It was British literature. The rest was like weights, choir, band, PE. Like I was a TA 1 hour. Yeah, I just didn't care about anything. And how many of you have senioritis already? You just don't care anymore. So graduating, or not graduating, finishing my junior year of high school, I celebrated by going to Claire's in the mall and getting my ear pierced where I could hide it with my hair, where I was allowed to grow my hair at Chick-fil-A so that I could get away with having an earring because I was such a rebel. I've got a picture of that too. It's the next one. So that was at Claire's in the mall, getting my ear pierced. So we all go through phases. We all go through phases. We all go through stages. We all go through different trends. That was me at 18, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I know it. I looked younger. I looked skinnier. It looks like my son, yes. But yeah, that was 12 years ago now, 12 and a half years ago. So that's it. You're saying I look old now? Is that what you're saying? All right, so maybe you can relate. You look back at old stages of life and you think, what was I thinking? What was I doing? Why didn't somebody grab me by the shoulders and shake me and tell me, stop it? Yeah, you can take that off now. So I've grown since then. I'm more mature. I am now fully aware of how uncool I am, and I'm okay with that. I can live with it. So when we look at those different versions ourselves, maybe we find ourselves asking that question, who am I? And it can feel like an overwhelming question to ask. Who am I? It goes like, it's a deep philosophical question, like, who am I? It's what people tend to ask when they're at a life crisis, right? Like, who am I? What's my purpose here? What am I doing with my life? Anybody ever seen Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Anybody? What is the meaning of all life? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's an old sci-fi from like when I was your age. The meaning of all life is 42, by the way, according to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You'll just have to look it up. But when you ask these questions, it's sometimes a little bit overwhelming. But maybe several things come to mind. You think of words like maybe I'm funny, I'm cool, I'm not cool. I'm strong, I'm entertaining, I'm quirky, I'm focused. You might think of a number of adjectives to describe what makes up you, right? And you may think of maybe what family you come from or where you live or anything like that, or a special skill that you have. Maybe it feels overwhelming because several things come to mind, like you're maybe conflicting things, like you're deeply interested in other people, but you're also an introvert who doesn't always talk much in social situations. Does anybody relate with that, by the way? Like you are interested in having like good relationships with people, and you like people, but you're introverted and you also don't want to talk to people, right? That's kind of my dilemma at times, if I'm being honest. Maybe you're simple when it comes to your music taste, but your style preference right now is a little complex and specific, maybe. Or maybe you love to play sports, but you're also really into music and band and all that kind of stuff. And that's how I was when I was in high school. I was a little bit into both worlds, even though it feels like you can only choose one nowadays. So maybe let's go deeper. Maybe it's not just the stuff you like or your stuff that you're participating in, but maybe it's that you feel like you literally have to change who you are depending on the context that you're in, right? You got to be one person at your drama rehearsal and a different person at basketball practice, or you maybe when you're family, or when you're hanging out with your friends or your teammates or your classmates, you've adjusted to learn to contextualize the version of you that it gets shown on the outside, your outward identity, in other words. And that seems to fluctuate depending on what environment you're in, which can make it confusing as to who am I really. All these different contexts have you managing these different identities and the way you outwardly express yourself. And this makes answering the question of who am I maybe a little bit complex. And isn't it true that just like styles change, your identity tends to change over time? Like the things that make you are different. If I were to ask you right now, what makes me Zach? You'd be my name, yes. What? Star Wars, what else? Ouch, that hurts. Being super nerdy in high school, she says. Okay, I'll take it. You say Justin Bieber when you see me? Callie says it's an insult. I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you. Thank you. Can I sing like him too? No, okay, didn't think so. All right. Who can, if we're being honest, right? Yeah, right now? Like, no, I'm just kidding. All right. We're going off track a little bit. Okay, so if maybe there's a version of you in the past, maybe the version of who you are right now, and there's a version of you somewhere in the future of what you'd like to be. You envision yourself a certain way, and that's projected into the future somewhere. Then maybe you've heard things like you can be whatever you want. You guys heard that before, right? Like you can be who you want to be. You can be whatever you want, whether that's like your career or your literally how you identify. Who are you? You can be who you want to be. You can express yourself however you want to express yourself. But that begs the question: if I can be anything by just picking something, and hear this because this is important. Our culture says you can be who you want to be. You can be anything that you want to be. So it begs the question, if you can be anything by just picking something, then who are you really? Is there an unchanging version of you underneath all the outward expressions, all underneath all the descriptions, the labels that you put on yourself? Do you get to pick who you really are underneath, or is that something that you will always be? What's the difference, in other words, between the temporary versions of you and who you really are at your core? Does that make sense? It's a valid question because as we've learned to contextualize ourselves in different environments, and as we've noticed that our idea of what makes you, of what makes me, as that changes through the years and adjusts, then what's the difference between the temporary versions of you and who you really are at the core? It's an important question. Many people don't ask it till they're in a life crisis. Some people are asking it every day, and it's an important question to address. Other ways we could ask this question might sound like this. Can I change parts of my identity without losing sight of the real me? Or maybe how many labels can I change and how often before I fully lose sight of who I am at the core? How can I be true to my shifting interests without having an entire identity crisis and feeling like a fake? How do I distinguish myself from everybody else in a way that feels authentic to who I am? Okay. What if everyone else seems to be okay in certain boxes, but I don't want to commit to any boxes? Right? Does my value change based on my outward identity? How can I be unique without losing sight of really who I am? All this leads back to the question of, when labels are gone, when the expectations are no longer on you, and the pressure is gone, freedom is gone, when it's just you, who are you really? So that's kind of what we're going to be diving in here, because if we don't know who we are at our core, our outward identity will never feel quite right. Because we'll be trying on all these different identities, and if it doesn't match what's really underneath, what's really going on inside, there will always be a disconnect. There will always be discontentment. There will always be this uneasiness about ourselves. And this is huge. You see this in your peers. You see this on social media. You see this with all the issues that are being talked about right now in our society. This is really at the core of most of the issues that you guys deal with in high school and beyond, but especially now as you're forming your own identity, coming into your own person as a young adult. This is really at the core of a lot of the questions and a lot of the thought process that goes on in our culture. So this is important that we take the time to look at it. So we're going to actually look at a few different passages to build what I think should really build our identity at our core. And so to reference a few verses to really kind of shape this, I want to look first to a psalm that was written by King David. It says, "When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them. Yet you made them only a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You gave them charge of everything you made, putting all things under their authority. The flocks and the herds and all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, the fish in the sea, and everything that swims the ocean currents. O Lord, our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth." So I think what's cool about this is that he's saying basically, in spite of everything around us, everything that looks beautiful, everything, all in creation, there's something different about us. Why is it us? And especially now, as you like, the universe has expanded greatly since thousands of years ago when David wrote that. Is about 3,500 years ago, I think, when David wrote that, between 3,000 and 3,500 years. And so when David writes that, he didn't even understand, like, they didn't have the Hubble telescope. They weren't able to see how ever-expanding and far-reaching our galaxy is. They didn't have the microscopes to be able to look at the cellular level to see how complex our universe is and how in the tiniest details. So since writing that, the universe has become, it's at least a human understanding, infinitely more complex. And yet, he makes the point, we are mere mortals. Why would God pay attention to us? And if he does, then there must be a reason. And what's that say about who we are? What does it say? In other words, being human makes us an impressive piece of valuable work. Just the fact of being human, despite anything else, despite whatever else is in our universe. It is the fact that we are human that makes us impressive. And it's the reality that it answers this question that we are valuable to God. In the ever-expansive galaxy that we live in, who are we, mere mortals, that God would pay attention to us and care about us? In other words, we seem like a speck compared to everything else going on, but yet God hones in on us. Why is that? It says that you are valuable to God. So that's part one of your identity, okay? That David is pointing out in that psalm. You are valuable to God. Number two, let's go to Genesis chapter 1. It says, this one tells us why, okay? God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. So right there in the very first chapter, in the first book of the Bible, God sets it off straight that you are intrinsically valuable because you are made in his image. So to answer the question of who are we, the writer of Genesis says that we carry out a part of God's image in us. We are his image bearers. And so we sometimes act in ways or make decisions that are in contradiction to that, right? We act in ways that if somebody were not a Christian and they looked at the way that we lived our lives, and if we treat the people around us, we live our lives just like the rest of the world, there's nothing different about us, then that means we are not very accurately pointing people to God in the way that we live our lives. In other words, we're not doing a good job of being image bearers of God. But yet, there's something more to this. While that's a problem, we are still made in God's image. And so, when it comes to the question of who are we, it's important to know it's not based on our behavior. It's not based on the things that we do or don't, the things we're able to accomplish or not. Our value isn't tied to any of that. Our value is tied in the fact that we are human beings created in the image of God, and God has created life solely with us in mind for the purpose of it. And so then I want to go to a passage in the New Testament. This is Paul writing to the church in Colossae, and he says this. He says, Christ is the image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and supreme over all creation. So when we've tried on all the different identities that we tend to wear, when we've tried on different ways to behave around different people, when we try to be somebody who maybe it feels incongruent to who we are at our core, all we have to do is look to Jesus, who is supreme over everything, because he's ultimately the one. When we lose sight of who we are, we need to look to him, because he demonstrates to us in his life exactly what it means to be image bearers of God. And so when we feel like we've lost our value, we need to look to him. When we feel like we aren't living up to what we should, we need to look to him. When we feel lost and confused about how we're supposed to outwardly express our inward identity, we need to look to Jesus. And so here's basically what I want you to get out of this, is that what God says about you is the truest thing about you. There's going to be all sorts of things that make up your identity. There's all sorts of things that you are going to take on as your persona, as who you are. When people ask, hey, who are you? You'll say, hey, my name is, insert name here. My name is Zach, and I am a youth pastor. I like Star Wars stuff. I I was not nerdy in high school, and that's not how I identify. That's not how, I'm just making sure you guys are still paying attention, right? But we'll say things about ourselves, and despite all those things, because those things will change. Careers change over time. The average person now has like 2 or 3 careers in their life, rather than just one. So that's a way that culture has changed. So if our identity is in what we do, then, well, that's going to change. Our identity is going to be ever shifting. So what's true when everything else is fluid in our life? Well, the truest thing about you is what God says. And so the reality is he's bigger than any of us, and each of us gets to reflect God in our own way. So you can express yourself uniquely while you stay true to who you really are. And for each of us, that's going to look different, because the question many of us ask is, how do I be me, yet also honor God? That's the question for Christians in our culture today. How do I authentically be me while also living in my true identity as a child of God? And so the reality is you can express yourself uniquely while you stay true to who you really are. As long as we remember who we are and whose we are, this will filter through everything else in our life, our decisions, our relationships, how we think of ourselves, how we think of other people. And so I'm going to put up a list of questions on the screen. And I want this to be your filter when it comes to figuring this stuff out. When we determine what makes us unique while staying true to who we really are, I want us to ask these questions. 1, what's most important to you? Okay, if it's not what God has for your life, then maybe there's a misalignment of priorities. Put it nicely. What is most important to you? Secondly, what do you value in others, in yourself, and in the world around you? Right? These are things that are shaping who you are and your identity. What are the things that matter most to you right now? The things that actually matter most in the big picture of life. Does your life currently reflect any of the things that matter the most to you? So in high school, I was at odds with this question because I felt like I was being told where I needed to be and what I needed to do all the time, all hours of the day. So I felt like my current life did not reflect the things that mattered most to me. But as I got older, what I realized is there's demands in every season of life. And you're never going to have unlimited free time and unlimited freedom. So how do you structure your life in such a way that it reflects the things that matter most to you? Number 5, do your values line up with the things Jesus valued when you look at his life story? Okay, read the Gospels for that. Number 6, what would it take for you to begin to live in a way that reflects what God is like to the world around you? These 6 core questions, feel free to write them down or take a picture of that on your phone. I'm going to leave those up for the rest of the sermon, but I want you guys to think through these questions as you process life. Pull this up a year from now. Pull this up 6 months from now. Pull this up over the summer when you got more free time, when you're trying to figure out what's next in your life, and when you feel like maybe your life is a little incongruent with what you want most. Read yourself these questions. And if you don't align your life around who God says you are, then it'll feel like you're always coming up short. But if you center your life around the things that God says is true about you, that even when you come up short, you will still feel peace, and you will still feel comfort knowing that you are a child of God and that your life is on mission for what he's designed you for. So think through those questions, and I want you to think about what it would look like if you started living your life as if you were an exclusive drop from God. If you were God's gift to this earth, what would your life look like to those around you? Think through that question. Think about what that might mean for your life. I'm going to go and pray. We'll go into our small groups and finish up the last 20 minutes we have together, and then we'll be done for the week.